Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to be reacting to this biomedical scientist answering quote-unquote pseudoscience question. I already watched some of this. It's some absolute science, so let's go ahead and start reviewing it.
I'm Dr. Andrea Love, biomedical scientist, and I'm back to fact-check false health claims. Let's answer your questions from the internet. This is Pseudoscience Support 3. Chamath says, advice I gave my son, which I need to follow more myself. Read the ingredients when you buy food. If you don't know what it is or can't pronounce it, don't buy it. And
yeah, that's pretty good advice for the most part. That's really easy advice to give to, people that are not too into health. They don't know what they're doing. So just telling them, oh, don't buy stuff with long ingredient lists. That's perfectly good advice. I don't see the problem here. But of course, he's going to disagree.
Surely don't eat it. Whether you can pronounce a word or not has nothing to do with what the thing is. I mean, it took me years to figure out how to pronounce acai, and that doesn't mean that it's harmful.
Doesn't apply here.
This is 5R1S12-dihydroxyethyl 3,4-dihydroxy.
Look, watch. She's going to go ahead and say, oh, this long chemical is actually found in a banana or some shit like that. So stupid.
Furan 2,5-H-one. Now, if you saw that word on a label, you might be scared of it.
Well, you should be scared because if you saw something like that on the label, it would be a synthetic version of that, not something naturally occurring in foods. So it's such a stupid argument.
Based on Chamath's logic, but the colloquial word is just vitamin C. The name of chemicals tell scientists important information about them, how many molecules are in them, how they're organized, and their properties.
Yeah, it's big difference between vitamin C and the food matrix and isolated.
This logic about avoiding foods or ingredients with chemical names you don't understand or can't pronounce is just an example of chemophobia, irrational fear of chemicals. And this has been a clever marketing ploy by many in the wellness industry to scare people away.
But it's very rational because if you see a bunch of added chemicals in like a food product that shouldn't be there, that should raise a bunch of red flags. And we do know that a lot of these fillers like guar gum, xanthan gum, red 40, a lot of these ingredients are bad for us. So I really don't know why she's hating on this advice.
Away from things that have no potential risk to their health. Decor Throwaway wants to know, have you all seen the Dirty Dozen list? What are we supposed to feed our families? The Dirty Dozen list is an annual list written by the Environmental Working Group, or the EWG, and they
just don't get any non-organic version of these foods. It's not that hard.
Claim it is the 12 most contaminated conventionally grown fruits and vegetables. And they're covered in pesticides and you should avoid them, scaring people away from very safe.
Well, you should scare them away from it because if you're eating food that contains a bunch of glyphosate, even if it's something that's quote-unquote healthy, like strawberries, for example, it's still going to be unhealthy for you at the end of the day. So you should always buy the organic variant of that food if it's in the Dirty Dozen.
And nutritious, conventionally grown fruits and vegetables that are half the cost of organic options in order to direct people to buy organic versions of those items. According to this year's list, spinach is the dirtiest of the Dirty Dozen. They
You should never eat that, by the way.
fail to include the fact that the amount of spinach you'd have to eat in order to hit the safety threshold for pesticide levels is 145 pounds of spinach. This is just 2 pounds of spinach.
That is an irrelevant argument because, of course, eating non-organic spinach once is not going to give you significant pesticide exposure. But if you're doing that stuff every week, that builds up. So I really don't get this argument that people use saying, oh yeah, there's only trace amounts of glyphosate. There's only trace amounts of pesticide in the food. It's good for us. No, that stuff builds up in the body through repeated exposure. Dumb argument, again.
Spinach. What the USDA's annual pesticide residue report actually says is that in 99% of all sampled foods, those trace levels of pesticides are well below the safety thresholds for each of those different substances. At Cali,
So you're trusting, first of all, you're trusting the safety thresholds of the government. When has that ever gone wrong, am I right? And again, it builds up in the body, so this argument is just stupid.
Grass-Fed Guru 48 wants to know, genuine question, why has red dye 40 not been banned? Literally everyone knows it's bad for you. Why are we willfully allowing poison in our...
Yeah, that's a great question.
our food. Red 40 is a coloring that's used in a variety of food, drinks, and medicines, including some gummy candies, medicines. They're colored so that people don't misdose them, as well as meal replacement shakes. Colorings are really important for people's perception of foods and flavors, particularly
Oh, little boo-boo, you need a red color.
those with sensory issues.
You need a red color on your goy slop.
And if you look at the acceptable daily intake of something like Red 40, in the US, it's 7 milligrams per kilogram per day, which is the same as it is in Japan, the same as it is in Europe, the same as it is in Canada, and the same as it is in Australia. And there's no way that you would be eating an excess in your
Again, if you constantly consume that, that's going to cause buildup. And another thing is, why are we trusting these government regulations? Do you not see the state of modern people?
daily diet, even if you only ate red colored gummy candy for your entire daily intake? We're not just going to remove colorings. They're going to be replaced with other colorings, naturally derived chemicals. For example, one of which is cochineal, which is a red coloring that is extracted from scale insects. So it's very ecologically damaging because these insects live on certain cacti species and they're harvested by farm workers. They have high rates of allergenicity. We don't have that.
How about just stop buying products that contain these colorants?
With Red 40. And on top of that, vegans and people that
No one cares about vegans.
adhere to Muslim or kosher dietary habits cannot eat foods that are colored using insect-derived coloring. So you're not
Okay, so they can just buy another food and it's not a problem.
actually solving a problem.
What do you care more about, what vegans consume or the general health of the population?
In many ways, you're making a worse problem. East Illustrator 225 wants to know, what does MAHA mean? MAHA is the acronym for RFK Jr.'s former slogan of his failed presidential campaign. It stands for Make America Healthy Again. The problem is that the whole MAHA platform and the movement are actually in direct opposition to what would make us healthy.
They're in direct opposition for trying to ban Red 40 and trying to better the food access in the United States. I don't get it.
We could be expanding healthcare access, but instead we're actually removing that.
Yeah, so instead of improving the food access and making people healthier via the food, she wants to actually expand the hospitals for more people to get hooked on a bunch of pharmaceuticals because that helps everyone, am I right?
From the most vulnerable people with cuts to Medicaid and Medicare. And with unfounded accusations about the harms of vaccines, we're seeing resurgence in many of these preventable diseases. They're also trying to cut funding for SNAP, which provides food access and financial support for lower income families. So if we really want to address some of these chronic illnesses that are the leading causes of death in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of MAHA. You know, they haven't accomplished that much, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, and I generally don't understand why she's hating. Oh wait, I know why, because she wants to shill for big pharma and she wants people to keep being reliant on all of these medicines and toxins.
We might want to continue to develop novel and innovative cancer screenings and treatments. Unfortunately, this current administration just gutted funding for cancer research, which is certainly going to have the opposite effect. Robin in Wellness says high-dose vitamin C is lethal to cancer while leaving healthy cells unscathed. Cancer cells can't survive it. They implode from within. Yeah, none of this is true. Just
Yeah, that's actually correct. That sounds like some BS.
like with most pseudoscience claims, that nugget of truth that vitamin C is incredibly important at a small level has been wildly exaggerated. Now, vitamin C is a water-soluble vitamin, so if you overdose on it, it will be excreted in your urine. The claims that relate to megadosing or intravenous doses of vitamin C and killing cancer cells are all based on petri dish studies where they're growing cancer cells on a
Yeah, I mean, I agree with her, so I'm just gonna skip this.
Losht says, I just spent the past hour reading about why fluoride is bad and freaking out, tin hatting like a mother. They're killing us. Good news is,
Yeah, fluoride is absolutely horrible, and the fact that they're putting it in the water is absolutely diabolical.
they're not killing us. Fluoride is everywhere. It's ubiquitous in nature. Decades ago, some dentists noticed that in areas where people had discolored teeth, they had extremely low rates of cavities. It was because of naturally high levels of fluoride in their water.
Fluoride in the food axis is totally different from synthetic fluoride added to the water. Completely different.
We fluoridate water at a very, very small level, 0.7 parts per million. So to put that in context, a gallon of water is about 3.78 kilograms. We would be adding about 2.6 microliters of fluoride solution, 1/20th of a drop of water. If you try to drink enough water where you might experience...
Okay, so according to her, poison is good at a low dose. So by that logic, let's put cyanide in the water and it's fine because it's at a super low dose.
Fluoride toxicity, you would have to be drinking 357.
It's not about experiencing full-on toxicity, it's that over time you start to develop some problems.
Liters of water, or 94 gallons in a day. You would die from water toxicity way before you would experience adverse effects from the fluoride. Fluoridated water has over 75 years of data to show that it prevents
short-term poisoning and long-term poisoning over short exposures, if that makes sense, is a lot different. So if you take like one big bucket of cyanide, you die in the instant, right? But if you take a little bit of cyanide over time, you might not die. You will still see negative effects, and it's the same thing with fluoride.
Cavities and improves dental health. The studies that are cited to suggest that fluoride lowers IQ or can cause neurodevelopmental issues, they're not correcting for other variables.
You want to actually improve dental health, then you can make people healthier and improve the food axis. If you look at the work of Dr. Weston A. Price, all of the isolated and primitive tribes that were eating good nutrition had no dental cavities. So why don't you just do that instead of adding freaking fluoride in the water that's harming our health?
That can impact the outcomes, such as high levels of arsenic or asbestos in the environment within those communities. Those exposures can credibly cause some of those issues that they're observing. Lots Name wants to know, so we should stop giving kids milk at school because of the hormones that are in milk, right?
Well, milk has naturally occurring hormones, which are not harmful in the slightest, but it also has added hormones, which are not good.
No, you don't need to fear milk because of hormones. The current body of evidence suggests that among children who enter puberty earlier than normal, it's often linked to obesity or excess adiposity. It has nothing to do with hormones in milk. Milk generally always contains hormones because cows, just like humans and other animals, produce hormones. Sometimes you might see on the label no RBST added to the milk. This is referring to bovine somatotropin, a hormone that's...
Yeah, it's totally different when you inject something in the cow. That's like saying injecting testosterone has no negative effects because it's naturally occurring in the body. Such a stupid argument. This woman has such stupid arguments, it's kind of hard to believe she's a quote-unquote biomedical scientist here.
Already naturally produced by cows. Dairy cows, sometimes they're given additional amounts of bovine somatotropin because...
Yeah, because they only care about the profits and not the actual health of the people.
It can increase milk production. Bovine is the key word there. This is a cow-specific hormone. It has no biological effect on people, even if you were to deliberately consume it. Claims about all sorts of other growth hormones or sex hormones is just patently false. Even if there were a biological effect, if you pasteurize your milk, which you all should be,
you shouldn't.
It's not gonna have any biological impact. At Drip Tech says, I developed EDS and POTS within the year that I got the vaccine.
Okay, I can't talk about that, so I'm just gonna skip it real quick.
Ivan Loans asks, why do we have so many kids with diabetes?
Well, it's because our food axis is shit.
We actually have very low rates of diabetes amongst children. Only 0.35% of people under the age of 20 have diabetes.
Yeah, so what if it's a low rate? Compare that to 100 years ago, it was nearly zero. So I don't know what she's talking about.
86.6% of those are type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune
Sure, and that has nothing to do with the food, right? Epigenetics don't exist, right? So stupid.
disorder where the pancreatic insulin producing cells are destroyed. 0.046% of people under the
Which is much higher than it was 100 years ago, by the way. So that is concerning, even if it is small amounts of people comparatively to the general population.
age of 20 have type 2 diabetes. That's not a
And there's also a lot of people that are insulin resistant that aren't marked as fully diabetic, which is a huge problem as well, by the way.
lot of children with diabetes. Near Strange asks, how can I avoid falling into the traps of pseudoscience?
Yeah, so generally not listening to you is a great idea.
It can be really hard to discern pseudoscience, which maybe looks like science or uses science-sounding language, but does not have evidence to support it.
Yeah, like what you're doing, like literally exactly what you're doing. You see the irony here, guys?
Watch for buzzwords instead of evidence. So if you see claims about gut healing, immune boosting, brain health, usually those are going to be followed by products or claims that don't have clinical evidence to support them.
And where is your clinical evidence? Just association studies like all of you people use, right?
Check your source, but then also check your source's source. PubMed is often used because it's a repository of peer-reviewed papers, but it's not a fact checker. It's basically like a library that's storing all these papers, and it doesn't automatically score them for whether they're
Yeah, the people who quote unquote score these, the peer reviewers, oftentimes have biases, and people who have worked in the peer reviewing space know how toxic it is, know how the biases get to them. And a lot of these prestigious scientific journals, they don't let papers get published in there because they go against the narrative of the reviewers.
reliable, whether they've been reproduced. The best way to be able to discern what's real and what's not is to go
It's to experiment on yourself and then just do your own research.
to a trusted expert in that field, because scientists and scientific experts are trained to
Yeah, listen to scientists like Dr. Paul Saladino, Dr. Jack Cruz, a lot better than you.
pick apart these studies and understand whether what they're saying is actually supported by their data. There's never going to be a situation in which a single paper is going to disrupt everything we know about a given scientific topic. And if that
So if there's an experiment that directly proves your consensus wrong, then, oh no, it's not good because it goes against the scientific narrative, right? Because the scientific narrative has always been right. Like they were right about eggs having high cholesterol and causing bad cholesterol in people, right? And they were also right about smoking. They were so right about that. Like this is so stupid, guys. Realize that the mainstream has been wrong so many times, you can't trust it.
were the case, it would not be circulated by a popular press article. It would be something that would be taking the scientific field by storm. Waste of Space 778 wants to know, what is the obsession with glucose spikes? The wellness industry have created this notion that non-diabetics should be tracking, monitoring,
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty stupid. As long as you eat a natural diet, you shouldn't worry about that.
and trying to manipulate their blood glucose levels by wearing what's called a continuous glucose monitor. It tracks blood glucose levels after you eat, before you eat, and so on and so forth. Doing this is not going to offer you any sort of health benefits if you don't have type 1 or type 2 diabetes. Non-diabetic people typically have blood glucose levels that range between 80 and 140 grams per deciliter of blood. Throughout any given day, you're going to have fluctuations within that range. You don't actually have to monitor it because your
Yeah, I agree.
pancreas is already doing it. Casey Means, for example, founded the company Levels, where she sells a continuous glucose monitor and a list of supplements and a recipe book, and it costs several $100s a month to kind of stay on the subscription plan that she claims is going to improve your overall health. The Glucose Goddess recently launched a supplement that she calls Anti-Spike. There have been studies where they tracked non-diabetics wearing continuous blood glucose monitors. In 99% of the cases, the blood glucose levels were always within that.
Yeah, I mean, within the wellness space, there is a lot of scams like this one going on, so you do have to be careful. But it's really not hard to navigate. Just think back to what our ancestors were doing, what humans are evolved to do, and what humans do in nature. And if you do that, if you go through that lens, you will be good.
Normal excursion range. There has been no clinical data that suggests that wearing this or trying to reduce the number or range of these blood glucose excursions is offering any sort of health benefit. It's not preventing the development of diabetes. At Robert Kennedy JC, a commentary account says, when JFK was in the White House, America was strong, healthy, and full of energy, free from today's epidemic of chronic disease.
Well, I wouldn't say they were completely free, of course. They were still living in modern society. You can't be free in modern society, or society in general. Even the ancient Egyptians weren't healthy, and that was a while back, right? They weren't as healthy as people living in nature. So, but they were, Americans when JFK was in office, were a lot healthier than they are now.
Since then, illness has skyrocketed, draining our vitality. Let's make America healthy again. JFK was in the White House in the early 1960s. Since then, we've actually improved health in a lot of ways. You see these really thick bars, the most predominant causes of death in the early 1900s. These were infectious diseases, tuberculosis, pneumonia caused.
Okay, sure, we've gotten rid of infectious diseases. We still have a bunch of other diseases that we didn't have before that have gone up, like heart disease. So I don't get your point here. And another thing I'd like to mention is a lot of these infectious diseases like tuberculosis, the people that Weston A. Price analyzed humans living in nature, they didn't get that. So just to point that out.
By bacterial infections and influenza, respiratory viruses and viral diseases, and gastrointestinal infections. These are all gone from our causes of death in the US today. And that's because of vaccines, sanitation, water treatment, antibiotics, the ability to do surgeries in aseptic environments.
I agree that modern medicine is great for a lot of things, but you can't just ignore the growing problem of all of these chronic diseases that are growing in the US and all over the world.
Blood transfusions. Today, we deal with mostly diseases associated with aging, heart disease, things like atherosclerosis, heart blockage, cancers, and cancer.
Sure, why didn't humans in nature get those diseases then? Like even the old humans in nature.
There are hundreds of different diseases with a median age of onset of 60 years old. So when we were dying in our 40s and our 50s, we were not living long enough for cancers to even develop. And then we're also dealing with accidents as a leading cause of death. When were we healthy in these people's estimation? When life expectancy.
Well, we were truly healthy in nature, but if you look back even 100 years ago or like 200 years ago in the US in the 1900s, there were basically no reported cases of heart disease. And people like this will come on here and say, oh, that's just because the diagnosing rates have gotten better. But do you think our ancestors were really that dumb? Do you think that they wouldn't write down if a bunch of people were suddenly dying from heart disease by clenching their chest and just dying? People wouldn't write that down, really? Like, come on.
Expectancy of humans was 47. 31% of those deaths were in children under 5. Well, that was what it was like in the 1900s. Penicillin, the very first antibiotic, was not available until 1945. So it might be really appealing to romanticize back in the day, but the reality is we're living longer, healthier, more vital lives.
Yeah, a lot of what she's saying is true. Like, Americans back in the day were not these super healthy people because at the end of the day, they were still living within the confines of an industrialized society. You really have to look for humans in nature to see true health.
Lives today than we were when JFK was in the White House. You don't get it.
No, that's absolutely not true.
85 wants to know, what's your take on germ theory denialism? Germ theory denialism is the false belief that diseases are not caused by viruses, bacteria, fungi, and so on. This belief started in the 1800s by a gentleman named Antoine Béchamp, a counterpart to Louis Pasteur, the founder of germ theory. And Antoine Béchamp believed in something called terrain theory, and that your environment and your overall physiology determined whether you would become sick or not. If you're healthy, you won't.
And that's somehow wrong? I don't get how that's wrong.
get measles, or if you were taking the right supplements, you won't develop cancer. But unfortunately, our bodies are a lot more complicated than that, and we know these.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example of how the terrain theory is proven multiple times. So there was this guy that ate raw meat for like, I don't know, like 8 years, right? And they examined his stool and they found that he had the E. coli, the most dangerous variant strain. I'll put it up on screen. And he basically had that strain and he was completely asymptomatic because his terrain was so good. And there have been numerous reported cases of people asymptomatic with that strain of bacteria. And the terrain theory doesn't say that bacteria doesn't cause illness. It just says that bacteria will cause illness in a bad terrain and it won't in a good terrain, which is oftentimes true.
Microorganisms that cause many of these infectious diseases. And because we know them, we can either treat them or we can prevent them through vaccination. And so the fact that there are still people that promote this, people like Joe Rogan and Bill Maher and RFK Jr. and many of their allies, just goes to show that there's no amount of scientific data that's going to get people to concede that their beliefs and their strongly held opinions are.
There's multiple cases of people being asymptomatic with E. coli, the most dangerous strain.
Wrong, because we've been collecting this data for over.
That strain is deemed to be inherently toxic, by the way.
200 years now. Sunflower Seeds wants to know, are IV lounges, drip bars, therapies a scam? Yes. Just like all
Yeah, I agree. Those things are a scam. All of these, like, again, with the wellness industry, there is a lot of scams, which I agree with this woman about.
dietary supplements, IV dietary supplements, are also unregulated, meaning they do not have to have evidence of efficacy or even safety. IV bags can contain some vitamins that you maybe need, but they also can contain a lot of things that you may not even know. You're now allowing an untrained person in a med spa to put an IV line directly into your vein, which opens the door for opportunistic infections. While many people report feeling better after receiving an IV drip at one of these bars, usually it's because they're getting hydration, not because this mystery cocktail of supplements is offering any sort of health benefits. Eat a healthy diet, eat your fruits and vegetables, and if you're feeling dehydrated, maybe
eat your meat and your animal products and some fruits seasonally.
Bert Rigg asks, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says beef tallow.
Let's see. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says beef tallow is healthier than seed oils. Is he right? Absolutely. We evolved eating saturated fat, not ultra-processed bullshit seed oils.
Is healthier than seed oils. Is he right? No, he's wrong. Like he is
God.
about most things. Beef tallow is a type of rendered fat derived from cows, and it is high in saturated fatty acids like myristic and palmitic
Yeah, which is good for us. Saturated fat is the most optimal fat for humans, the most stable.
acid. We actually have decades of robust evidence that show that a diet
Yeah, all the association studies. Oh my God.
high in polyunsaturated fats, like those in seed oils, compared to a diet.
There is so many confounding variables in these studies and you simply cannot account for all of them. So you cannot say that polyunsaturated fatty acids are healthier than saturated fat based on these bullshit correlation studies. Look at evolutionary biology. Look at what humans are adapted to be eating. We are adapted to eat saturated fat.
High in saturated fats, like those found in beef tallow, reduce your risk of heart disease, atherosclerosis, high levels of LDL cholesterol, that's the bad one, and triglycerides, and actually promote.
Yeah, I'm sure you're analyzing the healthy subjects, right? Because in these studies, they also analyze extremely unhealthy subjects because unhealthier people tend to eat more saturated fat and healthier people tend to eat more polyunsaturated fat. That doesn't mean that saturated fat is bad.
Heart health. A lot of people have been misled to believe that the process of extracting oils from seeds is harmful or it's leading to toxic substances in the seed oils, and that's just objectively false. These oils are purified and
That's not the main problem within seed oils. The main problem is that if you eat a lot of seed oils, eventually your skin cells will be built out of these super easily oxidized fats that when you go in the sun, that's going to lead to an environment conducive to oxidative stress and a certain disease that I can't name here.
sort of materials that are used for the extraction are not present in the seed oil. And finally, some people claim that seed oils are...
Yeah, it's so toxic that they have to go through like a big 10-step process to get the oil out of the seed. You obviously should not drink that. Stick to your beef tallow.
Inflammatory because when they're heated at really high temperatures, they generate these harmful byproducts. These seed oils would have to be heated to well above 400 degrees Fahrenheit for any of these potentially harmful byproducts to be generated, and that's not going to be happening.
Which they are in a lot of fast food restaurants.
If you're cooking with them or using them in your foods on a day-to-day basis. Some people promote the use of beef tallow for skincare, and this all harkens back to this appeal to ancestry because the ancestors used beef tallow, the false belief that natural chemicals...
Yeah, beef tallow has a bunch of vitamins. It's going to supply your skin with, you know, the fats it needs. I don't see the problem with beef tallow. A lot of people use it. A lot of people experience good results. Just because you're a grumpy ass doesn't like beef tallow because of the soyance doesn't mean that it's actually bad.
Are better. And so beef tallow, it's a natural fat. It must be good for your face. But science has given us knowledge of all of these different molecules that help to hydrate your face, reduce aging signs, things like sun damage. Beef tallow is not going to replace.
It's worked better for me. This video was absolutely horrible. People like this, these science influencers, they try to trick you by doing an appeal to authority and saying, oh, I'm a biomedical scientist, I know better than you. And then they say some bullshit like red 40 shouldn't be removed from foods. They say that glyphosate isn't bad for you. They say that you should buy non-organic foods that are on the dirty dozen. They say this bullshit that takes away all of the credibility within them. So stay safe from people like this and still follow ancestral health principles.